have one just lying around. I can show you. Have a look.
Most dangerous one.
You were very close. You were most venomous. So it sounds pretty dramatic, and if I get this, 25 people will drop dead straight away. Because it's so venomous, it looks at you. And you just... But this snake has the most powerful venom, but it can easily bite. And it comes from a very remote part of Australia, so hardly anybody encounters this species. And as a result, this species was relatively unknown until the 1970s. Before that, there was only specimens in jars. But in the 1970s, one of these turned up in the Queensland Museum alive. And they finally worked out where they were from. They were from the top of South Australia, or the bottom corner of Queensland. You get the inland taipan. No, it's okay. When we usually speak taipans, we're talking about the coastal taipan, a snake that is nothing like the inland taipan. Much bigger, much more dangerous, but the inland taipan has even more powerful venom. And it doesn't grow anywhere near as big as the coastal taipan does. It has reasonable size fangs though, and reasonable size yields of venom. So a bite from one of these would be almost certainly fatal without any venom. Good news though, when they discovered this species as a live specimen, from then on, the first person recorded bitten by one survived fine. There was a taipan anti-venom. It's been available since the 1950s for the coastal taipan. Works for the inland taipan as well. And since then, a third taipan species turned up in Western Australia. There's a desert taipan, western desert taipan. Looks very similar to an inland though. It almost looks like a cross between a coast and so you'd think it'd be very dangerous for me to stand around with an inland taipan, but I find a lot of inland taipans easy to work with and they get used to being handled somewhat. They still bite though. You just sort of get good at getting out of the way. Otherwise you get bitten. And then you can't do a snake show anymore. So. Now the next snake is the snake that used to be blamed on the most fatal snake bites in Australia, and especially in snake show men and show women as well. Because that was a thing back 100 years ago. There was plenty of snake men. They used to travel and go to every country fair and every public place doing snake shows. And at the time, very little was known about snakes. It was very easy to fool the public into just telling them just about anything you wanted about snakes. To the point that snake men used to take bites from snakes and then apply their own snake bite remedy. And then go, hey look, I just got bitten by the most dangerous snake in the world and I survived. Do you want to buy this antidote? Costs a lot of money though. Very expensive, but worth it. You go out in the bush, still to this day, people imagine if you walk around the bush you're going to get bitten by a snake, guaranteed. When snake bite to this day has been very rare in comparison to how many people we have around snakes and how many snake species we have that are highly venomous. But this snake was blamed on the most deaths. It was very common around Melbourne and in Tasmania, and we get it around Sydney, but it's much rarer around Sydney now. But you go out in the Blue Mountains, these are very common in Blue Mountains backyards, and it's one of my favourite snakes. But many snake showmen used to we're very close to this snake species because it's such an abundant species, and it's very, very defensive in some cases. And their defensive display is very impressive, but unfortunately, for me, many of this species lose their defensive display after being displayed. They get used to it, and they just don't care anymore. This species is called the tiger snake. Okay? It's called a tiger snake. Tiger snakes have a fearsome reputation and ability to bite. but they're also very predictable in many ways. One thing you can predict though is they're very accurate when they do want to bite. They flatten their neck and they sit in a low arm. When they bite, they can bite out any angle they want. And many a snake showman who came from overseas and maybe worked with cobras decided to start working with a tiger snake and got bitten by it. Some of them, first time they ever handled one, bang, bitten by a tiger snake. And many snake showmen died from this species, but many could tolerate its bite. Because they've been bitten by it a number of times and survived, they now had their own antibodies and they could be very resistant to tiger snake bite. Yes, they're mostly got stripes, but this one here's got very faint banding here. Originally known as the brown banded snake. I'd hate to have that name, tiger snake. This tiger here though, a lot of snake showmen got caught out by a tiger snake. Because as you can see, this one here, I get that climb away with me. But then if it suddenly decides to bite, you can't get out of the way. So it's best to keep their head well away. They sometimes let out a sound when they strike too. They go really loud, it scares the crap out of people. Tiger snakes are now rare. But last week, 2 weeks ago, a snake catcher we know in Melbourne, he got nailed hard by a tiger snake, and he almost died several times, and he's still recovering now. So, best not to get bitten by a tiger snake, but I've only ever had one tiger snake bite, personally. And I've never actually been treated for a snake bite. Sometimes you can just ride it in. I don't recommend it though. It's a must go. So that leaves us with one last snake. And the last snake, the one that causes the most snake bite deaths in Australia these days. No, red-belly hasn't killed anyone. Zero deaths.
What's the snake?
The horses. I've got to get it out. There's got to be a bit of pageantry, a bit of suspense when I get these snakes out. But this snake is very common in Western Sydney and all over the eastern half of the continent.
Go there. She can't
And if
play
you travel anywhere in rural New South Wales,
last snake.
you might come across this snake. And in some parts of Australia, that's the only snake you'll see around. So they're so common in rural areas where there's a lot of grain, a lot of crops grown, there's a lot of rodents. This species was much less known, say 100, 150 years ago than it is today. And even 100 years ago, there was a guy doing a snake show here. And his very first snake show he ever did, it was in 1913 here at La Perouse. He pulled out one of these and was doing a display and it bit him. And later on that day he died. It was his last day at La Perouse and his first day as well. He got bitten by a snake. They didn't have a lot of knowledge on its venom at the time. These days, we know it's one of the worst venoms that there is. The way this snake kills when it does is catastrophic. So it makes this snake sound really bad. Yet most Australians will walk within millimetres of one of these in their lifetime and never ever get bitten by it. They mostly stay out of your way. They're an active forager. Just before I get this snake out though, once per show, I do a quick lap with a hat. And if people like the snake show, they chuck in a bit of change. Or these days I take FPOS. I've got an FPOS thingy, which I've only been using since last year. Oh, there we go. Turn it on, look at that.
My bag has.
This has been the tradition, except for the FPOS wasn't tradition.
How much is in there?
But
$1 or more.
Thank you. I better get this last snake out. Oh, thank you. Another one.
Oh, later, thank you.
Yeah, how much do you want to chuck it? That sounds pretty good. Starts adding up. First couple of shows I can get purchased up. when someone chucks something weird. Thanks, mate. You gotta get his last snake out.
Say yes where we are.
I did that, then I did the video of him standing behind us. No, she hasn't replied. Oh, this is what I want to see. East of Brown. Once when I was with Kerry Richardson, big friends, they was big fat ones.
Alright, we better get his last snake out.
You can't pay car.
No, I didn't have to. It's actually cash.
No, have car. Can't pay car.
You would never go in this when I never. That's just weird.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Alright, let's get this last snake out. We'll get the last slang. Last slang. Slang is Dutch. Slang. So,
Yeah, it's okay to
get
give him
slang.
some money because you have to have them and do shows.
And to see what he does, because he acts very defensive.
Yeah, 100
And when
years,
people
but-
encounter this snake, they often exaggerate their encounters. He's the most defensive snake in many ways, probably in the world. Ash, you better put your legs full. You can not anyone dangle their legs. This big children. This snake here. He's called the
Oh, look.
Eastern brown snake. This very elaborately behaved
Angry.
venomous snake is the Eastern brown snake. He is the main man of the brown
看一下
snake.
宝宝玩吗？看一下宝宝。
He has this
看一下宝宝。
exciting defensive display with the high back.
看 baby。
Eastern browns are very defensive. So if you approach them, they
Look,
behave like
look
this.
at him.
And you don't want to exaggerate that
Look
behaviour.
at him. Looks angry.
Everyone does except for me. Because I encounter this snake on a daily basis. I work as a snake catcher and then I've got them at home as well. And then when I go down the creek, and my local creek, this is the main snake I get in my local creek. I know them really well ever since I was a kid. But I made sure that I stayed away from them when I was a kid.
好的了。
When I was an adult, I started catching them.
Come
They are very dangerous to catch, but completely harmless to leave alone. You can either stand right next to an Eastern brown and sit there very, very still. Don't move at all. The Eastern brown may even come over to you and slither through your legs and go over there. You can back away slowly if you come across an Eastern brown, or you can just stand there and look at them. And they don't actually do it. They can act very defensive if you force them into it. Otherwise, they're actually very inquisitive snakes. Even now when I move slowly, the brown snake sort of feels quite relaxed around me. The minute I step away and start acting defensive, he starts acting really defensive as well. Now their venom is in the highest category of all snakes. They have, it's right up there. It's the very highest category of all snakes. You get brown brown snake venoms alongside taipan venoms. The way they act on mammals is catastrophic. And some people die rapidly, but you know what? That's hardly anyone. Most people bitten by an eastern brown do not die. But when they do, it's almost like falling off a cliff. This brown snake you can be bitten by and you feel fine. You're okay, and then all of a sudden you go off the edge of the cliff. Their venom does nothing to a point and then it does everything at once. And it actually affects your blood's chemistry. It uses up all your clotting factor. And while it's using up all your clotting factor, you feel fine until it uses up all your clotting factor and you collapse. Once you collapse from a brown snake bite, you can hit your head and now get a brain hemorrhage from having incoagulable blood full of hemorrhages. So when people die of a brown snake bite, it's often from a brain hemorrhage and the anti-venom does not save them because they're hemorrhaging. The other thing you die on is a cardiac arrest. And that happened last week. Guy in Townsville went into a childcare centre. Even though he was advised by a professional snake catcher that was a brown snake, they thought it was a tree snake. He picked it up and it bit him 3 times. He went home and died from a horrible cardiac arrest and was completely unable to be saved and is now dead. So, very venomous snake. Not a lot of people die from it. But the best way to deal with eastern browns is absolutely nothing. If you're around them and they're out in the open like this, you've got to keep away guys who just, there's the idiot factor when it comes to snake bite in Australia a lot. Some idiot comes from somewhere and gets bitten by the snake. They're not walking along, tripping, skipping through the meadow and get bitten by an eastern brown. They actually go to the eastern brown and do something stupid. Somehow manage to get bitten by it and then fail to provide themselves with first aid or adequate care, because brown snake bite doesn't seem like much at all until it really does go downhill. So, only a small percentage of patients bitten by eastern browns actually are envenomated, and I know because I've been one of them. I got a little nip of an eastern brown. I thought, oh, hang on, I better get that looked at. Turns out it was a dry bite. And the thing that keeps us safest from eastern browns is not only they have dry bites a lot, but look what they do. They go find hiding places and they go and hide. Once they're hidden, they're not going to come out, they just hide. So would you like to give the eastern brown a round of applause for being a star? And if anybody has any questions, now's a good time before I start another snake show. Satsrika. Another Sapera. Sapera. मैं हिंदी सीख रहा I've been learning Hindi and I love it because you can speak English and speak Indian, speak English. They understand everyone. No one understands them. Punjabi people, what are they saying? I don't know.
Hey, did you meet George Cairns?
George Cairns?
Cairns.
Yeah, many times. Oh, back
I met him in 1980.
yeah.
He's a good friends with my dad.
Oh, was he a snake guy?
George Cairns.
No, but who was he?
Oh, my dad wasn't. No, he went to school with my dad.
So, George died 2001.
Yeah.
John's still alive. John and him would take turns in doing the show. So he was there one week. George would be here. But I remember George. When I was around 1980.
No.
George, always.
I was 14 in 1980. I met him because my dad knew him and we went to his house. He had still had the snake pit in the backyard.
Yeah, they got demolished the day after he died.
Oh, the day.
The day after he died, they come with a bulldozer. He even kills him in his so John is 2 doors up, and he's still there. He's 85, and I see him. We see him quite regularly. But he stopped doing the snake show in 2010. He's 85 now, but he was 70 when he stopped.
What's your name, sir?
My Mine's Rob Ambrose.
Pleased to meet you. My name's Rodney. From Canada.
From Canada. You must have been American. You don't look American.
You look Australian, eh? Kinda.
Canadians sound different.
No worry about it.
It's like mixing a Kiwi up with Australian.
Yeah,
Kiwis
yeah.
hate it.
They hate it. Just got the tail end.
Hello.
So I'm sure.
Oh, I'm going to start another one.
Oh, are you?
I do them all afternoon. Usually answer a few questions. Talk to a few people along the way. No worries. There you are.